something that's, kind of bitchy.
Pretty bitchy.
Bitchy? I know.
It's just, bitchy.
Well, first of all, you're a little bitchy. That's next level bitchy.
Welcome to Bitchy History, the irreverent history podcast where one history professor gets to bitch about history and the impact it has on the world today.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bitchy History. I know it's been a little bit. It's been a hot second, but this semester's been a little bit wild. And so as a result, I haven't been able to get as many episodes out as I would like. But mea culpa, I'm coming to you with a really, really special episode today to make up for all of that, which I think will make you guys very happy. This is also the very first time that we've done a video episode of the podcast. So for those of you who are watching on YouTube, hi, you can actually see my face now. This is the first time you've been able to do that, really. So today we are going to be doing an episode on the history of the pro-life movement. But what is really special about this episode is that I am having Gwen Levey, got your name right this time, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Good. Okay. On as a guest. And this, Gwen is a musician that I came across on TikTok. That was where I was introduced to her music. She came out with this song. When did you release it?
I released it in September of 2023.
Right.
So it's been out for 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been out for about 6 months. This is a great song called Barefoot and Pregnant, which just encapsulated everyone's frustration over the current issues with GOP and how they are treating women's bodily autonomy. So before we get started, I'm going to play you guys a little clip here from the music video if you have not heard the song, because if you have not, it's criminal. You need to go download it right now. It's on all the streaming platforms. So.
That's the good old boys drinking whiskey and rye. What do we do with the women in our lives? Let's keep them barefoot and pregnant and down on the farm, cooking in the kitchen and cleaning out the barn, praying in church, a credit to her gender, popping out babies like a Pez dispenser. 9 out of 10 evangelicals would agree. Let's keep her barefoot and pregnant like the good Lord meant her.
It's an absolutely fantastic music video as well as a fantastic song. Every time I watch the video, I'm like crying and laughing at the same time, which is great. So Gwen, would you like to introduce yourself for the audience?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I feel the same way about this song. You can almost hear the tears behind the smiles. I'm Gwen from Gwen Levey and the Breakdown. My band and I are here in Nashville, and yeah, I don't even know where to begin, to be honest.
No, I'll start off with a few questions. So obviously you were inspired to write the song based on current political events, but what really cemented the idea of the song in your head when you started to write it?
Yeah, so when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I remember I used to work in a boutique shop here in East Nashville, and I remember sitting in the shop and just feeling this incredible wave of depression and anger and just shock. And I had heard that, they had released the Supreme Court decision a little early, that someone had leaked it. And I just think it kind of flew over everyone's heads, at least for my generation, our generation. No one even thought that Roe v. Wade would be overturned that are our age, I feel like. And then there was a bunch of abortion clinics saying, well, we told y'all. But I think no one was paying attention, which is another reason why Roe v. Wade wasn't made into law. And I know we're going to get into the whole history of it. Yeah. So I was deeply shocked by it. And I'm a survivor of childhood sexual assault. So when this happened and I heard that they were, especially for girls who are sexually assaulted, that they weren't going to be able to get the health care they need and deserve, it really struck a chord in me. And I went to my co-writers, Will Rambeau and Tree Austin here in Nashville, and I said, I really, really want to write a song about this. This is so important to me. And I remember Will was like, hey, we have this idea for you, Barefoot and Pregnant. And from there, I remember the write went really quickly, and some of the best writes always do. And it felt like magic because I was completing my EP, which is a 5-song short album. And I always have a social commentary on all of my all of my albums.
Right.
And we needed that. And then Barefoot and Pregnant came to be, and we knew that we were ready to go in and record the album. So that's how it came to be. That's my own personal story. And I know I'm not the only woman that has had stories like that. So I knew in my heart, I knew I wanted to give a voice to people that didn't have one. And I've always been told I'm the girl with the voice. So, I was like, I better use it, especially now when, so many people are suffering.
Yeah, being able to use that voice is so important. I think it's, I would say more women than not have those stories, whether it was when they were a child or as an adult or just anything. It is shocking the amount of people that have those stories. I've shared this with people in the past, but that I've been roofied twice in my life, which is just absolutely, like, it destroys, even if nothing happens, which in my case, in both cases, pretty much nothing happened. That went further than the roofing, but it just breaks your trust.
Yeah,
it's everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a real crisis. It's not just a healthcare crisis, it's also just a real tragedy what's happening right now for women.
It's a civil rights crisis, basically.
Absolutely. So I'm getting chills right now talking about it. So
it is mind-boggling. And just thinking about some of the laws that have been passed or are attempting to be passed in some states right now. I remember listening to something, I can't remember which state it was right now off the top of my head. I should have written it down. But they were trying to pass a bill for exceptions for girls under the age of 13. And they didn't approve it. What was it? Was it Tennessee? It was, yeah.
Because I remember Gloria Johnson brought it to the table and they shut it down.
Yeah, it was insane. And the reason behind one of the complaints was like, oh, this would allow children as young as a year old to get an abortion. And it's like, well, first of all, I don't think you understand how the human body works. But secondly, yeah, that it would, if it was necessary, why would you not want them to be able to,
Exactly. And most of the people who are making these laws, they don't even know how pregnancy works. Most of them can't even get pregnant themselves. So
yeah,
it's mind-boggling to me how misinformed and uneducated our lawmakers are, specifically about this issue.
Yeah, as I like to say when I'm talking about it with my dad, I was like, these are the kind of people who are making these decisions who still think that women pee out of the same hole that they had the baby out of. Like, they don't know anything about the human body. My dad used to be a science teacher, so it drives him up the wall. And it's absolutely insane that these people are allowed to make decisions about my body instead of me and my doctor making those decisions. Like, there should never be government involved in that at all. It absolutely drives me insane. So, it's so great to have a message or a theme for your albums when you're coming out with having some sort of social message. How did you end up deciding to do that with your music?
I've always written about different social issues, and that's been a big part of who I am. But I've definitely, I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. My parents were very politically involved and really got me involved. I started campaigning, I remember, for President Obama when I was 13 with my dad and my mom. And so politics was always a part of our family, even though I wasn't going to be a politician. So the fact that my music and advocacy can come together with my music can come together with my advocacy is really important to me. And it's become even more important, obviously, with this issue. I remember one of my biggest, most controversial songs was about weed, being pro 420, pro weed. And that was a big deal. And that was, even though Nashville, you wouldn't think so because there's so many drinking songs, but weed is still so taboo here. It's wild. Then fast forward maybe 4 years later after my first album, and here we are, and I'm a woman singing about being pro-choice. I have these certain controversial elements. I would say there's 5 that are kind of working. I think I wouldn't say against me, it's for me and for others. I want to be that, just true to who I am, which is, I mean, I'm just myself. Honestly, I'm not pretending to be anything else. So
Right.
I hope
And that's the way to be. That is the way to be. And speaking of your advocacy, I think one of the things that made me like, I loved the song, but then I was like, well, I wouldn't necessarily, I don't always follow every, musician that I like on TikTok or things like that.
Right.
But I started following you on TikTok because I kept seeing that you have a very similar MO when it comes to dealing with trolls as I do, which is what a friend of mine likes to call the Louisville Slugger approach, which I absolutely love. And so you do a lot of advocacy for obviously pro-choice stuff on your TikTok channel, and you have to deal with a lot of angry men, pretty much predominantly. Of course, there's probably some angry pro-life women scattered in there as well.
And that's when it's saddest, is when it's women. Men,
it really is, yeah.
misinformed, ignorant men, I can deal with, but it's when it's the women. It just breaks my heart.
I was teaching, off topic, but I was teaching yesterday in my entry level American history class. We were talking about the 1950s and kind of the push to move women back into the home, and there was a book that I'm reading for my PhD project. And in it, basically, the author is talking about how, like, any woman who doesn't want to be a mother, doesn't want to be in the home raising her children, is mentally disturbed. And the irony of this book is that it's written by a female doctor, a noted physician, no less. Like, she was well known and had a career, right? And
she would probably have advocated for having women lobotomized.
Exactly. This is a woman who not only was like pulling the ladder up behind her, but setting it on fire, like as she was pulling it up, because she's not going to let any other woman be up there with her. Which, yeah,
and that's the brainwashing runs deep. And if you don't agree with abortion for yourself, you want to be a stay-at-home mom. I have my best friend, a stay-at-home mom. I always say that that was her choice, and that's the most important thing here, is that women deserve the choice to choose whether they want to be a stay-at-home mom or have a career the rest of their lives. Like, both my aunts never married, never had children, and they had very successful careers and are very happy. I think there's this whole stigma that's thrown around that, women aren't happy if they're working and they don't have children and all these things. But one of my idols is Stevie Nicks, and I love Stevie Nicks, and she never married or had children, and I think she's pretty freaking happy. So she's doing what she loves.
There's nothing stopping you from being happy. Being happy is not about like having a certain lifestyle or certain way of living. That's not how that works at all. But yeah, you get so much insane and just utterly ridiculous hate on TikTok. And maybe talk a little bit about that and how it affects you. And I mean, I think you're taking from what I've seen of you posting responses, I feel like you're a little bit the same as me, which is you kind of feed off of the hate, where you're kind of like, haha, I've made them angry, I enjoy this. But also it probably gets a little bit stressful too.
It does. At first, when it was first started going, the song first started going viral, I got nothing but hate. I don't know what the algorithm was doing. It was targeting people that just were very anti-choice. And I remember it took a real toll on my mental health, because especially the comments that I have gotten about my weight, that's like the easiest thing for them to try to attack. And as someone who struggled with eating disorders, body dysmorphia, I'd gotten to a place where in the music video, I was like, that was like the most beautiful I'd ever felt that day. I was the happiest I'd ever been. And here are these random men trolling me and attacking me and putting my face next to pictures of Jabba the Hutt from Star Wars and making me feel absolutely ashamed of myself. And that's something that I've really had to overcome. And I feel like I have, and those comments don't affect me the way they used to, which I'm glad to say I'm on the other side of that. But I mean, it got really intense, and I have gotten death threats. I've gotten people saying that they're gonna put me against a wall at my shows, like just insanity. And these are people that claim to be pro-life, and I always point that out, because how can you advocate for that? And then they even try to use the Bible to justify them saying they want to take my life. It's absolutely
Insane,
insane what's going on, and I know that it has gone on. I mean, there's so many people that have been openly pro-choice, doctors who performed abortions. I mean, people who've really lost their lives, and being in Nashville, getting up on stage, talking about you saying the word abortion and then singing Barefoot and Pregnant in front of people that I know that half that crowd at least is not pro-choice. And I mean, I feel like it, people are always like, you're so brave, but it's bravery, but it's also knowing it's the right thing to do. So, and I'm not the only one out there doing the same thing.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we haven't come that far from, the days of like Loretta Lynn being banned from the airwaves for recording The Pill. Like, we have not come that far.
And I've had doors slammed in my face from people in the music industry. I know someone who's been working the music video, getting it to CMT and all these other outlets, was even saying that they're a little disappointed with the way that more of the progressive country stations, etc., have kind of just not really put a spotlight on this. And it's just such a polarizing issue, even for people who are progressive in country music. And I mean, now they're finally starting to accept people of color in country music, gay people. I mean, but being pro-choice is now the I don't know if we can touch that kind of thing. So
we can't do that. That's too much. We've gone too far, which is insane, because going back, like, the history of country music is not the history of right-wing conservatism. It really is not. It's Johnny Cash. There's nothing like politically conservative about Johnny Cash or Loretta Lynn or any of these like big names. Dolly Parton, for crying out loud, right? There's nothing like politically conservative about the music they put out. It's always been very, very progressive, very, pro-woman, pro-Native American, pro-freedom, all of these things. And it's wild to see what it's become, which is a whole other episode that I need to do at some point about what happened to country music after 9/11.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I read something, and it's like, if you don't wrap yourself in the flag and, all that stuff, then you're not going to make it in country music. And listen, I love country music. I almost want to say fell into country music. I've always loved it, and I've always been told you can sing it really well. But I didn't grow up on mainstream country music. I grew up on, people like Neil Young and
the old school stuff that was, Linda Ronstadt and Bonnie Raitt, people that had country influences but weren't necessarily straight country. But what I love about country is, are groups like the Chicks, who were really my first introduction when I was growing up to mainstream country music. And I love that it's predominantly, the roots are anti-establishment. So you would think that absolutely
the genre to come out blazing, but it's really, really suppressed, and it's still
absolutely. At least we do have that. My favorite genre of country music will always be the angry wife murders her abusive husband genre, which is prototypical Goodbye Earl, the Chicks, right?
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite genres of the entire area of music. I have so many of those songs. Like, I have an entire playlist of it on my Apple Music. But yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And before we move on, I just want you to know you look phenomenal in your music video. So anyone who is saying anything negative about them, like, I write murder mysteries in my off hours, so I know a lot about disposing of people. Just letting you know. Have fun. Now that I've put it out there, I can't help you now that it's on the podcast. But Now
That's why it's called bitchy history.
Exactly, right? But yeah, absolutely. You look phenomenal in the music video. The music video is just so great. I love the little like Sylvia Plath references and things like that. It's very layered, and I love the line dancing pregnant women and all of that. It's an amazing music video.
Yeah, and those were all my friends. You know, people are like, were those actors? Yeah, all friends. And Marcus, my partner, is the drummer in it, and that's another thing, another issue for another day. Being in Tennessee is being in an interracial couple, but we've gotten some horrible comments, which I'm shocked. Even though my mom just keeps saying I'm naive, you know.
Yeah, you think it's gotten better, and then you get hit right in the face with it, which is really unfortunate. Like, you guys look so happy together. Every time I see pictures of you guys on Instagram, you look so happy together. Like, anyone who's mad about that is ridiculous.
It's genuine love, and I just I don't understand people who are
the whole thing is insane. It is insane. People are very well, they're evil. There's a lot of evil people out there, unfortunately. I used to just call them kind of ignorant, but no, it's just straight up evil at this point.
Yeah, and they're projecting that onto other people. They're, you know, just really unhappy in their own lives. And
exactly.
Internet feeds is a, you know, breeding ground for hate and trolls, unfortunately, even though it's going to be a wonderful place, like it brought me and you together, but
but
there's
a lot of bad people. There's a lot of bad people out there. I've done a lot of I have been doing a lot of deep dives into tradwife and MRA spaces recently for PhD topic research, and it's a lot. It's a lot. There's a lot of bad people out there. Like
tradwife today with someone. We're trying to put together this whole political fundraiser for, you know, people of the Tennessee Three and then other political candidates, and it's going to be a music festival and everything. And one of the people who was helping organize it was talking about tradwife, and I just wrote a song about that.
I'm looking forward to that then.
Yeah, but I just, you know, I didn't even know what that was when I first heard it, and she didn't either. We were talking about it, and
it's a wild thing to be in, and a lot of the people in the MRA spaces need to be on all of the lists for all of the criminal behaviors, where I'm like, you are a walking red flag. Like, there's nothing else about you. MRA, so the men's rights activists, like, they are all terrible.
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
It's insane. They're terrifying. I don't know, but yeah. So let's hop into kind of a history of the pro-life movement a little bit. So I've talked a little bit about this on my podcast. I talked about it in the episode where I did the history of abortion, but I didn't really delve too deep into this. And so I knew bits of it. And as I started to pull together more research for this episode, the angrier and angrier I got, because it's just one like awful thing after another piled on top of each other. Obviously, in my podcast, I'd already talked about like the formation of the American Medical Association in 1847, which is where we kind of get this male-dominated area of medicine, which decides that, you know, hey, women don't need to be helping women give birth. We don't need midwives or any of that stuff. Men can handle childbirth, because that's clearly the people that should be doing it, right? Oh God, they are just an absolute nightmare. Like, so many problems with them. Yeah. So, and I sent you the notes on it, but I know there were a lot of them. Like, my notes were just wildly extensive, because I kept finding more and more stuff that just is like, they said what? They said they did what?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we go back, like, way back in 1847, you get the formation of the American Medical Association. And then you go even, you know, right after that, you get this, the chair of the AMA committee on criminal abortion. He wins this prize on an essay that he writes, which is a book called Why Not? A Book for Every Woman. I love just some random dude being like, here's a book I'm going to write to tell you you're a bad person for policing your own body. Like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, even though men have that freedom.
Of course, they can do whatever they want. They don't have any problems. They can just do whatever, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, he writes, his book is absolutely, there's just so many bad lines from it. But I thought share a couple of quotes with the audience. Physicians have now arrived at the unanimous opinion that the fetus in utero is alive from the very moment of conception. That was not true. That was not true. But this is where that whole concept comes from, because before this had never been an issue. No one had ever thought that the fetus was alive from conception. That was not the way the Catholic Church felt. That was not the way the Protestant Church felt. That was not the way English law felt. Like, nobody was doing that.
They didn't even care about this issue. Like, it wasn't an issue.
Didn't.
Just, okay, you can have an abortion and it saves lives, and yep, yeah. It was a woman's issue, right? Women were kind of non-entities as far as the law was concerned in many ways. And unless they did something like injure a man, they weren't going to police their movements that much. And so, this was a woman's only issue. Midwives help you give birth. Men are not allowed in the room at all, really. Right. Very
this
true.
is a woman's purview until the mid 1800s. And it's wild. They suddenly are like, yes, now we know that life starts at conception. Because why? Because, well, racism. Horatio Storer was just absolutely, he was the kind of guy who definitely believed in the great replacement theory, where he's like, we got to make sure white women are having more babies, which is predominantly what his issue is.
Make sure that white people weren't going to become the minority. Exactly.
That's his main issue. And this is 1866, right? And so this is right after this end of the Civil War. And there actually is a low birth rate for a variety of reasons. And yeah, go figure. And he is concerned that Black women are out producing white women as far as birth rates are concerned. And so they need to make sure that white women stop having abortions so that they can have more children, which honestly feels like that's the exact same thing they're doing today, right? It's not even, it's partially a race issue, but it's also just an issue of we need more cheap labor. So if more people have kids,
and they're trying to make it seem like having an abortion, like being pro-choice, is racist, when it's quite the opposite, because women of color are the ones that are the most affected by abortion bans, because they are the poorest in this country, and it's just abhorrent, really. It is that what's happening. And they try to say that's what they do. The pro-life movement says that they flip everything in the opposite direction. Really, they're the ones that deep down believe that.
Yeah, they're absolutely horrifically hypocritical in the way that they address these issues. Like, I remember back in the day, I was never pro-life. I was never a pro-life person, but I was more aligned with the Republican Party at one point in my early 20s. And I remember talking to pro-life people who try to make these arguments that being pro-abortion is racist because Margaret Sanger had issues. Like, Sanger has issues. I'm not going to deny that. She was not the best person when it comes to issues of eugenics. That being said, eugenics was like a common issue for a lot of people at the time. She was not outside the norm. And also because, well, there's more abortion clinics. Planned Parenthood puts more abortion clinics in ethnic minority neighborhoods or things like that. And I'm like, that's not racist. That's just responding to a need. That's free market principles 101, right? It's capitalism, right? If more people need it in an area, you're going to open more places. And the fact is that most white women, not people who are in poverty, obviously, but most white women have access to medical care in a much easier way than most minority women do. And so it becomes an issue. And Planned Parenthood doesn't just do abortions. They also do so much else, so many other things for underserved communities. So
what is it, less than 7% of what they do?
I think so, yeah. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but that's the number I remember from most recent discussions. Yeah.
And they want to cut funding for Planned Parenthood, and yet they send all this money to the military for Viagra. So
because God forbid the soldiers can't get it up. Like that's going to just destroy them mentally. They can't possibly go out and kill people if they can't get it up. The logic escapes me. Actually, it doesn't escape me. It makes perfect sense because the military is so hyper masculine. But it's just there's a lot to take in with that. There is definitely.
Over 50% of our tax dollars go to the military.
I know. Oh my God, it makes me so mad. I'm like, why? I remember a while back They talked about shelving a research and development project they had on a new jet, like a new fighter jet, and they decided they didn't want it. Like the military had never wanted it. They didn't need new fighter jets, but they'd still spent like billions of dollars on this research and development project, only to shelve it. And somebody did the math, and they realized that all of the student loan debt in America, all of it, could have been paid off by just that one research and development project. But no, we can't possibly forgive student loan debt.
They want to keep people poor, and that's women, barefoot and pregnant.
I know it is. It's barefoot and pregnant, and then the poor men, they get recruited into the military. It's a whole cycle. It's a whole thing. I sound like a conspiracy theorist, like that guy from, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who's like, oh, it's all connected, but it really is all connected. Like when you start looking at it, it's there is kind of a terrifying underlying conspiracy to all of this.
Yeah,
it's a sad reality. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and then the opposite side has their wild conspiracy theories, except that there's no real proof in that, what they're saying.
There's so many wild. Honestly, I think government is just like 5 conspiracy theories stacked in a trench coat on either side. That's all that's going on, is a bunch of people trying to control everybody. I don't know. Both sides of politics tend to kind of leave me drier than the Sahara Desert at this point. I'm not for it. I mean, like, yes, of course I vote, and of course I'm involved, but I'm not enthusiastic about it the way I used to be. All right, so let's keep talking about the history of this. So the stuff in the 1800s is wild, but the real like pro-life movement doesn't really get started until later, right? And this is the real pro-life movement isn't going to get its big start until kind of the 1960s, 1970s, and it has always just been really wild to me to know that the Southern Baptist Church, in particular, was pro-abortion up to a certain point.
It was. I was really surprised to have read that as well.
Yeah, it's a very, very strange thing. It's very odd to know that, you've got people in the Southern Baptist Convention in 1971 saying, we call upon Southern Baptists to work for legislation that will allow the possibility of abortion under such conditions as rape, incest, clear evidence of severe fetal deformity, and carefully ascertained evidence of the likelihood of damage to the emotional, mental, and physical health of the mother. Not even just death, emotional and mental health of the mother.
So important, which is what they're fighting against now, which is wild.
In so many ways, absolutely. But it's a very, very progressive stance for the 1970s for the Southern Baptist Church to hold. And then you just go, well, how did it change? Where did it go wrong? And I've realized again that I sound like a crazy person because I attribute it all to like one dude. And I'm like, Peter Weyrich. If I could go back in time and do something like and set one person on fire, it would be Peter Weyrich, which is a name that probably nobody knows because he's just this like random tiny bitty character in conservative politics back in the day. But he's at the core of so many problems in conservatism. I don't know how familiar you are with the Heritage Foundation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right. So they're becoming a much more popular, like they're a much more well-known figure right now because of the whole Project 2025 thing, and they're trying to basically create a dictatorship. Peter Weyrich.
Theocratic dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly. And Peter Weyrich is the guy who founded the Heritage Foundation.
Wow.
I mean, he's at the core of so much, which is why I sound like a conspiracy theorist when I talk about it. It all comes together. Yeah.
So you have the facts to back up what you're saying, to be fair. So
exactly, it's not a conspiracy if you have the facts to back it up. Like if they're saying it,
there's a trail that leads back to this person.
Exactly. And like it's not fair to say that that no one was pro-life before this. Obviously they were, or there wouldn't have been a need for Supreme Court cases like Roe v. Wade, right? If everyone had been pro-choice and there had been no problems with access to abortion before this, there would have been no need for it. Like after 1900, every single state had abortion bans in place, basically. And, people like Billy Graham, obviously, were very anti-abortion. things like that. So it's not like it didn't exist. The Catholic Church was very anti-abortion, very big on this, but it hadn't really been a political move until then, which I think is really weird. Even James Dobson, like, I mean, I don't know, Focus on the Family. I grew up listening to Adventures in Odyssey, so you know,
Okay.
big religious thing for the Southern Baptist Church. James Dobson also said that it was okay to have abortions. Like, abortions were a reasonable thing, that you needed to have them. It was good for children and mothers and all of those things, and it should be down to the individual person to make those decisions. And it's like, yes, back when people were sane individuals, and even after,
honestly, at its core, what I think is that any way they can use to control people, the masses, by whatever force, they really don't care, because they just want to hold their power, and money is power to them, and they want to hold their place. And that's really what probably they realized. They're like, well, we can control people by feeding them this misinformation about abortion. So it's just another way to control the masses and to control women, because
exactly,
they don't want women running the world. That's for sure.
They don't want that, despite the fact that, historically speaking, women generally do a better job at most of these
Look at
things,
Iceland.
right? Look at it. And look, well, I just think about the episode I did a while back on homesteading, where it turns out that statistically speaking, women were more likely to prove up their claim and actually successfully hold on to their land when they claimed a homestead in the West than men were, because men were wimps. And when the going got tough, the men went back east, and women were like, my life's always sucked. My life's always been hard work. This isn't any different, So one of my favorite bits of a diary from a single woman homesteader during that period of time is talking about how she's like wakes up from a nap, and she's taking a nap outside, and she looks and she sees a rattlesnake, and she grabs her shotgun and she shoots the rattlesnake, and she's like, I'm just not going to take naps outside anymore, and I'm like, that's a terrifying woman right there, who can definitely handle her business. And yet, but so many people want us to believe that women have just been these, dainty little flowers and incapable of anything for so long, for all of time. And what you said about it being about control is absolutely right, because none of this has actually been about, Weyrich was a very, very strongly Catholic, like a Orthodox Catholic. So I'm sure he was pro-life regardless of this, but he used this not because he cared about this as a major issue, but because it was something to get people to the polls. That's what it was. It was a way to convince people to vote Republican in the 78 and 80 election.
Any way to sway people and control them.
Yeah, that's all it was, and it just always,
that's why Donald Trump is pro-life. Like he's that man, I'm sure, has paid for several abortions, but it's whatever he can do to control and take power. It's like he doesn't actually believe what he's saying. It's all it's like a game to people.
Exactly. None of it's about the actual children. None of it's about, because if it was, they would care about the aftermath. They would care about children who are born into families that can't,
just ignore abortion the way, they should ignore abortion the way they ignore the foster system, which is so broken. And people are like, oh, well, you could just give the child up for adoption. So my argument there is you're not only going to put a child out there that's unwanted and is going to go through this horrible foster system, but you're going to force a woman to give birth, go through the trauma of that, and then have to go through the trauma of giving up a baby because she can't afford it mentally or emotionally or physically, like, to have the child. And it's just, they don't care about life.
And to force a woman in America, where we have one of the highest maternal mortality rates, in the highest in the first world, right? To give birth regardless of her wishes, that is, you're asking her to risk her life.
Because
very
pregnancy
literally
is very dangerous, and people I've had men argue online with me, like, well, how do you think you're here? Like, how do you think all these people are here? And I was just watching a documentary about Salem. Obviously, when the Puritans were running the country, they had whole graveyards dedicated just to women who died in childbirth. Like,
Absolutely.
it's so common, and you're asking women to be livestock, basically, just giving birth.
Yeah, and
Yes.
especially it comes down to also the maternal mortality rate is so much higher for women of color because, and they just do not care. They do not care about these women because when it comes down to it, in many ways, this is a continuation of racism. It's a continuation of an attack on people of color because, yeah, sure, we don't really care if, they're saying we don't really care if women of color die in childbirth because that actually suits our purposes just fine.
Yeah.
And they don't care about that at all. And it is wild to me because the whole crux of pushing for abortion to be a major issue in politics happens because segregation and racism was no longer cool. Like, it was no longer something you could use anymore to use as a political point. And because Bob Jones University and all of their insane segregation, they didn't allow they didn't have an integrated school until like the 60s, and then they didn't allow white and black students. They segregated their white and black students even after that, and they didn't allow like interracial dating. They didn't allow any of those things. And the IRS eventually comes at them and says, you can't do that. If you want your tax-free status, if you want to remain not paying any taxes because you're a religious, whatever this institution is, you have to actually follow the laws.
Yep.
Surprise, surprise. And they were like, oh crap, they're not going to let us get away with this anymore in private schools anymore. And it's, and then all of a sudden you have these people going, oh, racism's not cool anymore. We gotta rebrand. We gotta find a new topic to control people with. And they're like, you know what? Women suck. Let's.
Yeah, because it all is connected. And
Yeah.
at the point that making abortion an issue was just another way to push a racist agenda, which is always, like I said before, wild when people say that being pro-choice is racist, because it's quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite. And it's another reminder, this constant reminder that I find of the importance of intersectionality in feminism, because so often you get these people, this is the typical white woman feminism where they act like everything is about them. I think the worst example of that after Roe v. Wade was the absolutely ridiculous assertion that, well, the reservations can just open abortion clinics there so that you can use them because they're technically not under U.S. law. And
what?
Yeah, this was
that argument.
Yeah, they were like, oh.
The not to mention the clinics are already so at capacity. I mean, you can't even get an abortion. Most people can't get an abortion time. It's just so wild, and because most clinics have closed, and women have to travel out of state. So you're saying keep them on the reservations? Well, how many women need an abortion and need this health care?
And who's going to fund these? And who's going to build them? And why do white women have the audacity? I say as a white woman. To ask Native Americans to risk their setup on their reservation
of
white women's health. Yeah. Especially considering the long history, which is another episode I need to do at some point, of sterilization of Native American women and the stealing of their children and all of the other things that have happened. Like, no, white women don't get to ask Native Americans to set up clinics for them on their
sacrifice what's left of what they have.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? If they offer and you want to fund it, that's fine. But don't go asking them to do it. That's not for you to ask at all under those circumstances.
I never heard that. That's
yeah. It was right after. It was like a few months. It was the first couple of months after Roe was overturned, and I was like, talking to a lot of people. We're talking about like, what can we do about this? What's going to be the, what are we going to do to protect abortion rights and things like that? And that was a suggestion that came up that started circling around on TikTok and other websites. And there was a lot of people just like
suggestion.
The audacity of that suggestion is so... Yeah, it made me mad. I was about to lose my mind when it came up, because it's like, no, you don't get to make that suggestion at all, when you have pretty much ignored intersectional issues for the most part for decades. I mean, certainly we're getting better about that now, but for a long time, it was just, oh, white women. And then if Black women are like, hey, we also have issues that are unique to our experience, because, you know, being Black in America is a far different experience than being white or being Hispanic or being Native American. And white women are like, nah, it doesn't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter. Like, you know, we're not going to listen to any of that. And it's like, you guys are the worst. Why are you doing this?
They have not, like, just my partner Marcus, he's Black, and talking to his mom about the things that she had to deal with growing up, it's insane. And in comparison, you know, it's just, and people forget that, and it wasn't that long ago, and that's why they're trying to keep racism alive. And honestly, this conversation just makes it even more clear to me that that's what's going on. So yeah, I mean, I know you know it, but I'm like, oh, it's obviously a race issue.
Yeah, it all connects so tightly into this issue of keeping people in their place, of you know, keeping people of other people of color in their place, keeping women in their place, and making sure that, well, I have this bumper sticker on the back of my car, which makes guys mad all the time. I can tell because I get tailgated by guys in trucks. I have 2 stickers. One says "feminist killjoy," which I think they don't like too much. I think it's funny. You know, I teach women's history, so I've been called a feminist killjoy by students before, jokingly. But the one that I think really makes it mad is, "May you have the confidence of a mediocre white man." And so much of everything that's going on these days in politics is wrapped around the issue of mediocre white men no longer being able to be just automatically successful just because of their race and their gender.
And they're like, oh, well, I can't get into schools because of affirmative action. And then they overturn affirmative action. And, you know, they're still not, it's like you done based on your credibility. And you're trying to blame people of color and women
for your lack of skill. This idea that, like, oh, they're coming here, when it comes to like immigrants, oh, they're coming here and stealing my jobs. Oh, right. Did Rajesh, the neurosurgeon, steal a job from you, the guy who like pumps out septic tanks? Like, no, he didn't steal a job from you. You were never going to be a neurosurgeon. Not that there's anything wrong with your job. That's an important job. But people who are immigrating here are not taking your jobs. They are completely different subsets of people with, honestly, we have a very, very classist and elitist system for prioritizing immigration in this country. So we are, you know, bringing in skilled people, not anyone. We're making it more and more difficult for people who aren't skilled workers to come in. And, you know, I've tried to immigrate to Europe. I get it. Lots of countries have those systems set up, but those countries don't have a, you know, plaque on their statue the statue that represents their country that says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses." Like, they had no expectation of taking in the needy.
Yeah,
they're kind of based on that,
right? And I mean, it only got worse after the Trump administration. My dad worked in immigration law, and he was a research consultant. And I mean, literally the laws just got worse and worse. So the fact that they're saying immigration and illegal immigrants coming in has never been as bad as it is now, that's not true. It's actually
numbers are
a lot harder to get into this country, especially with all the attention on our borders. And I mean, ever since 9/11, really, too. I mean, it's just been insane. So I mean, you've been to the airport since then, so
I know, I have to fly later this week, and I'm already like dreading it just from the very start, because I hate flying. I'm a very nervous flyer. I'm flying on a Boeing, so that's not helping me either. I'm like, I'm gonna die.
It'll be okay.
I'll be fine.
I know, it's always scary. My aunt was a world traveler. She worked for the World Bank, so she lived all over the world: Afghanistan, Cambodia, London. So she lived all over, and she was always flying. She's like, I used to have flight anxiety, and she used to say, "Gwen, there are millions of planes that take off all the time," and I'm just like, you know what? That helps me put into perspective. So
I just like
bad.
I like to make the jokes about the Boeing thing because I told my students that I had to do an online class for my students because I'm flying out, and so I had to cancel classes and move them online for one day. And I told them, that I was flying out, and I was like, pray for me. I'm going to be on a Boeing flight. And one of the students goes, so are we supposed to pray that you come back or that you don't? Because then we won't have to finish the semester. And I was like, that is rude. Say that to me. Like that you're going to get a failing grade in this class if you make jokes like that. Like, he's like, no, but if you don't come back, you won't be able to fail me. And I was like, I will leave a note. I will leave a note to the head of the department to fail you if I don't come back. Based entirely on this conversation, kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just,
what? People who don't travel don't have a worldview, so they can't see how the world is functioning. They're just in their bubble, and those people, it's really rude, but you know what I mean. They are
traveling. Yeah.
They stay ignorant because they choose to be. I mean, you can live in your mom's basement and access information and educate yourself, but I don't know, a lot of people that
they don't.
Right.
They don't. Yeah, they don't bother. There's a lot of people who are very happy. Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is easy.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They will continue in it.
Oh, I'm right because I'm a man. And I'm like, well, what are you doing with your life?
And you get these people, like, in talking about issues like abortion, you will get these people who are just fundamentally so ignorant about the entire discussion, and you can't even talk to them about it because at some point they're too ignorant to even start the conversation because you have to give them so much extra information just to bring them up to the right level. And it is this issue of people like, well, everyone was always against abortion, and I was like, no, they weren't. Yeah. This is a really recent thing. This is just like the last 160 years, like, is really, and that's Benjamin Franklin wrote instructions in his almanac for how to restore the courses. Like, this is a normal thing that everybody knew about.
Restore. What do you mean the courses?
Your monthly courses. So basically, there was an issue that you could have a problem in which your courses stopped for some reason. They would never say what it was. It was like, oh, there's a blockage. You're not menstruating properly, and so here's a recipe to restore them. And what it was an abortifacient is what it was. Wow. And I mean, in the instructions, in the one that's in Benjamin Franklin's almanac, it literally says something about how, like, to prevent this from happening again, don't talk to all the pretty boys who offer you ribbons. Like, basically the implication is like, keep your legs closed and you won't have to do this again. But it's also not very judgmental. Like, the book itself, it's like, here's a problem that women often have. Young women often have this issue. Here's how to solve it. And if you would like to not have to solve it again, here's my recommendation. But if you need to solve it again, you can do this again, right? It's actually not written in a judgmental or harmful way of saying, like, you're a bad person because this happened to you. It's a normal thing.
Take responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody says that in those books.
Yeah, all the people in my comments.
Keep your
legs closed. Oh, well, no one wants to get you pregnant anyway. You're never gonna have that issue.
Speaking. Well, first of all, you're very happily in a relationship, so they're just jealous. I mean,
that's the funniest part. Me and Marcus are always like, it's hilarious. And then one time, this guy went on his page and was like, "You got to break up with her man." All this stuff, and he was coming to my defense, and I was just, oh my gosh, like,
who does that? You gotta break up with her. Like, I'm the petty enough person that I would be like, I'm gonna marry her just so you can't, like, now I'm gonna do that. I mean, that's not a good reason to get married. Pettiness is not a good reason to get married, but that would be a great way to announce it.
I think our best way is just to stay together and be happy, and
exactly, just make everybody else like deal with it and just be like, you know what, we're happy and we're together and you can't tell us what to do. And it's just, I've been watching right now, I've been binge watching Call the Midwife. So I don't know if you've ever watched it.
I haven't watched that.
Yeah, I've been binge watching it. I'm like on season 3, I think, now. And I just think of that show a lot when people say things like, you can just close your legs or you can just, whatever. And it's like, first of all, no birth control is 100% effective. So if you're in a relationship and you are having sexual intercourse with your partner in a heterosexual relationship,
Right.
there's always going to be a chance for that. And that does not mean you've done something wrong, right?
No,
When
absolutely
you get
not.
pregnant and you can't afford that baby.
Yeah, and men can have all the sex they want, but women, just because we can get pregnant doesn't mean we lose our bodily autonomy when we become pregnant, even though I've had men in my comments say women lose their bodily autonomy when they get pregnant.
They literally think that. Yeah, they think that somehow you are no longer a person.
Yeah.
But quite frankly, we're only a few decades past the law considering women to not legally be a person once she's married. Like,
yeah, we just celebrated how many years of women being able to have a credit card without
50 years. Yeah, it's exactly 50 years since that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw shared that, and it was just
it's wild. A wild thing to know that you couldn't. I'm planning on doing an episode with my mom at some point in the near future.
Oh, good.
She always has this story she loves to tell, which is she was living in right after my older brother was born. She's living in Louisiana, and she went in. My dad worked in the oil field, so he was gone a lot of the time. He's gone for like weeks at a time, and she went in to get a library card, and they wouldn't let her get a library card because my dad wasn't there to sign for it. And this is way past 74. And so
insane.
This is like 89.
Get a library card. You can't read. You're not allowed to read without your husband's permission.
Of course not. Yeah, And their argument, I think, was I may be wrong about this, but I think the argument they made was that, like, well, we can't know that you'll be able to pay your late fees. And I'm like, what were late fees in 84? Like, I don't know, a half a cent a day? Like, what are we so worried about?
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous story. But I tell that to my students almost every semester when we start talking about the history of women's rights issues. And students are like, wait, when was that? And I was like, yeah, this is like 83, 84. And they're like,
that's not long ago. That's our
they
mother.
Wouldn't let you get, speaking of like showing people how long ago it was, I like to show people pictures of Ruby Bridges as she is now. And she's so young. Like she's not old at all, and it's they suddenly realize, segregation wasn't that long ago. Like, this was really, and my favorite story about that, which is totally unrelated to abortion, but I love to share it, is that my first semester teaching, I was talking to my students. We had this little like in-class discussion thing about the civil rights movement at the end of that section. And I asked students, like, what's one thing that really surprised you about what we talked about, this kind of thing. And one of the students is like, how young Ruby Bridges is. Like, that really, really surprised me. And then she followed it up with, it kind of puts it into context why everyone's so worried about people talking about civil rights. They don't want us to know what our grandparents were doing.
Exactly. It was,
and I was like,
at all.
It's an awkward conversation to have, to find out what your grandparents were doing, or great grandparents were doing during this era. Yeah,
exactly. Before the pandemic and Black Lives Matter, I mean, I didn't learn half the stuff I've learned in school, and nothing. We just glossed over it. And I mean, there's so many atrocities that happened, and we don't talk about it. And like I said, what was the Black stock? It was the town where it's like basically the Black Wall Street.
Greenwood, Greenwood in Tulsa, yeah.
Yes, and they bombed and killed everyone there, and
it's wild.
No one talked about it. I never learned about that in school. It's like in Germany, the Holocaust. They have where you walk around. There's plaques from the Jewish family lived here, but for slavery, we don't have that. People aren't remembering that. Instead, we have Confederate soldier statues, and I mean, Andrew Jackson's still on our $20 bill, and his home, the Hermitage, is here in Tennessee, and I passed by it on my way to the recording studio, and I'm just like, can this just please, like, he should not be celebrated. Anyway. No,
and that's what those are doing. They're celebrating them. But when it comes down to it, I mean, so much of this is interconnected. That's why, I get off topic so often on these episodes, because again, everything is so interconnected when it comes to history. But this is why it is so important to talk about these histories, because the histories of of slavery, the histories of racism, the histories of abuse of women and things like that, because if they're allowed to become politicized to the point where, oh, we can't talk about this because it's a political issue, and you can't talk about it in history classes because you might be trying to convince your student, like brainwash your students. It's like, I'm sorry that history has a liberal bent to it. Like, I'm sorry that that's the way you feel about this.
That's the truth,
Because,
and they don't want to hear it because they literally want to just be ignorant, and that's the saddest part too.
It is. It really is super sad, and I don't know how to combat that. It's very difficult. I mean, I do my best, right? I teach, and I make my podcast, and I make my TikToks, and I do those things. But it is very disheartening sometimes to see how much people want ignorance, because it is so much easier to control.
Yes, and I mean, speaking of slavery, I always say forcing anyone to do something with their body and life against their will is slavery, and then they're like, you're just being so extreme, like, you know, that there's no such thing as biological slavery just because you're a woman. And I'm like, this is literally, you are enslaving women by forcing them to do something with their body and life when they didn't choose it. And they just
for your benefit.
And then they always bring up Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood and how racist the pro-choice movement is. And I'm just like, well, it's quite the opposite, but it's it's always going in circles with all of these different people, you know?
Yeah, so many of them aren't interested, even if they know the truth, they, you know, whether they know the truth or don't know the truth, because sometimes they know and they're just spouting the party line for whatever reason. But yeah, they're not interested in the truth. They are interested in a pushing an agenda. And then they complain that we're the ones pushing the agenda. And I'm like, you're projecting onto this, because I'm not. I sit there and I really do consider my lesson plans. Yeah. I consider, am I actually pushing an agenda? Am I not giving students all the relevant information? Am I kind of skewing what I'm talking about here? And then I look over it and I look at the notes and I'm like, no, this is just what's historically accurate.
Yeah.
It's just that for conservatives, this seems like it's skewed. And that's because they want to believe in some sort of like fantasy of the past that has nothing to do with reality, which is exactly what I'm presenting a paper on next week. Which is, you know, on the 1950s and people having this skewed perspective of what it is. So it's a fairy tale. They want a fairy tale of history, and that's always what they want for some reason. And they don't want to talk about the fact that, you know, abortion has just been a giant attempt to control the voting populace, instead of, you know, it's not an honest issue. It's never been an honest issue. From the very beginning, it's been political. Since Storer started off by trying to convince white women to have more babies, it's been political. So, so thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a really, really fun conversation.
I could go on with you.
And we could, but I figure people have a limited time span. They're willing to listen in on a podcast. Yes. But you know, I do want to do an episode on country music at some point. So maybe you'd want to come back on and do on that, because I really love, like, I listen to it, but I'm not a musician by far. So it'd be nice to have another perspective on it, talking about how country music shifted after 9/11. So I think it's a really,
so much
really interesting topic.
Being in Nashville and being progressive and
absolutely. I'll send you an email. We'll plan that out for later this year. We'll get that on the books at some point. Yeah, it'd be awesome. Everyone, let everybody know where you can find you, and that way they can follow you and download your music and just have a really great time with it the same way I do. So
thank you again for having me, Professor Meredith. If you're my followers and watching, definitely follow Meredith as well. And but you can find me at Gwen Levey Music and at Gwen Levey The Breakdown on all social media. So pretty much on everything, I think, at this point. So hopefully TikTok doesn't actually get banned, but follow me on Instagram, Facebook,
all the stuff.
YouTube shorts.
Right. And if you have any trouble finding her, you can always go look at my Feminine Rage playlist, which has Barefoot and Pregnant on the playlist. So you can find her through that, certainly, and look her up. So and that's linked. I've got a link to that playlist on my website, bitchyhistory.com. Obviously, you guys know. I still love my podcast name. Somebody told me it was going to be hard to market it. And I was like, I don't care. I really don't. I love this.
No, both are good. Both are good.
All right.
You know how many
Thank
people
you.
told me Barefoot and Pregnant was going to be?
This is going to be a bad name too. Yeah, but no, it's perfect. It's the best possible name you can have for it. I love it.
Ruin your career. I'm like, no, I am just getting started.
You're just gonna, yeah, and you've done phenomenally. Like, people are really into this song. They really, really love it. And I have to admit, I've only listened to a couple of other songs from you, but I need to download the rest of them at some point.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that one kind of went on my regular repeat playlist, because I like to scream it with feminist songs in the car. Like, that's what I do. So
like more on this new album we're working on right now. So
fantastic. Yeah, I'm so super excited to hear about the Trad Wife one, because that is like, I'm so excited for that, because I love that concept. I love it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on, and we'll see you. I'll see you back here on the show at some point, because I definitely would like to have you back on in the future on a lot of different topics. So yeah, it'd be awesome. And everybody, you can find the podcast on bitchyhistory.com. Please subscribe. You can also subscribe to the Substack on bitchyhistory.com so that you can get more information about the episodes and things like that. And I also have some paid content coming out now too. So consider signing up for the paid version. It's only $5 a month, and you help me to get pay for my coffee and pay for flights to conferences and stuff like that. So that'd be wonderful. All right, you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you next time.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to hear me bitch about history. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe and make sure to visit bitchyhistory.com to sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter offers extra resources on the topics covered in all of our episodes, as well as on the topics covered in my videos on TikTok. Supporting the podcast is really easy. Spread the word to your friends, grab some fabulous Bitchy History merch off our website, or consider becoming a paid subscriber. Your support means the world to us.
History.
History. History.
History.
What a bitch, right?